Am I on?
Yep.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the HIVE. HIVE is the Non-Timber Forest Product Exchange Program e-learning platform inspired by the Beehive, place where the bees exchange information and where their knowledge sharing actually takes place. It's a very dynamic place to interact and exchange their information, and we strive to be that, so hence the name. Okay, I am Edna Magigat from the NTFP-EP, and with me managing the platform is Dazzle Labapis, the CSO Forum Facilitator. Before we begin the formal webinar, let me first remind you of some ground rules. Participants' microphones are actually muted throughout the session. If you have questions while the webinar is ongoing, please click the raise your hand button in your screen. You may ask the question yourself, and we will unmute your microphone, or we can read it aloud. You can also maximize the chat box for any clarification or technical difficulty that you are encountering. The presentation today will last for 1.5 hours, and we have actually 3 of our colleagues from the CSO Forum who have been actively participating in the several Conference of Parties meetings, and recently in the COP24. They would have a presentation, and after each presentation, we will allow 5 minutes for question and answer. And after all the presentation are completed, we will have 30 minutes for discussion. So for many years, a global agreement on climate change was aspired by many but doubted by most. And in 2015, 195 countries actually, signed up and did something to combat climate change. Because at this particular juncture in our life and in our planet, we have this unprecedented responsibility to be stewards of nature, not just actually depending on our environment, but actually we have the power to actually change our destiny and determine the course of nature. So without much further ado, I welcome the first speaker, Emmy Primadonna. Emmy Primadonna is the RED Project Coordinator of WARSI, the Indonesian Community Conservation. It's an NGO based in Indonesia. Emmy has been working on community tenure rights issues and RED Plus since 2012. She has an extensive knowledge on community-based forest management and developing economic and livelihood social forestry on RED Plus. She has been following the UNFCCC issue since 2015 in Paris, particularly on the discussion on NDC, Market and Nonmarket, as well as RED Plus, and she would be sharing it with us now. Emmy's group and project, RED Plus project, has recently sold its certified carbon last year, and the community is now enjoying benefits from that. So congratulations, Emmy, and take it away.
Yes. Dazzle, can you share the presentation, or I will share with my own? Here.
You will share on your own, Emmy.
Okay, let me try. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to share my presentation about what is stake for the COP24, the last COP in Katowice in Polandia. So basically, the presentation will discuss about giving a little bit review what have been achieved so far after the Paris Agreement, what has been achieved during the COP24. And the last one is about what is the pending issue for the coming COP, for the COP25. So where do we stand 3 years after Paris? Every country's climate change is very, very important, and we need to reduce the climate below 1.5 degrees or 2 degrees. So it is quite success because it's very hard for all the countries to agree for the achievement to lower down the climate until 1.5 degrees and below 25 degrees. It is we can say this is quite successful because we are the same page commitment to reduce that. However, the Paris rule books itself, the rules books, it's not finished yet. So the UNFCCC mandated to finish the designs of the Paris Agreement work program until 2018. So the outline of Paris Agreement work program, or the abbreviation is PAWP, it's about the mitigation, cooperative approach, adaptation communication, finance, technology, transparency, global stake implementation, and any additional measures. So what happened after the Paris? After Paris, we already have many, sorry. After Paris, there are 3 sessions UNFCCC's meeting. It's all about how to make a negotiation text for the Paris rule books. And until the last times of the COP24, the text is quite very, very long. I think the last in Bangkok, 307 pages. And many area still brackets. Brackets, it means they are still not agree on it. And the other issue is the imbalance political power between the developed country and developing country. Because every country have a different capacity, have a different ability to achieve the target of 1.5 degrees. Meanwhile, the developed country who already in advance in terms of technology, finance, they demand more for the developing country to do that. While the developing country said we cannot do without international support. That's the things. And the other things makes the Paris rule books is a little bit slow because one agenda couldn't finish when the other agenda is also finished. For example, when we talk about the NDCs guidelines, it links to the transparency, it links to the accounting rules. So when the accounting rules is not finished, the NDC guidelines will not finish too. So that's why it's like a parallel to somehow, but sometimes it's also to follow the next issue finish, then we can go to the other agenda. That's make the negotiation is very, very complicated and long. And then what are the designs of the Paris rule books or Paris Agreement is like this. In 2015, every country agree to reduce the climate change or reduce the temperature of the earth. We call the Paris Agreement. So how they performs, how they implement to the reduction of emission, they make INDC, intended first. They make the intended to reduce the emission, and then when it become the document, it's become NDC, nationally determined contribution. Basically, this is very, very national one, not top down. This is like a bottom up. The country measure their own capacity and they make it into the document as a pledging, as a promise that they are going to do like this. And 2018, just before finish the COP24, the Paris, no matter happen, it should be finished because we cannot delay for more about that. And the 2010, during 2018 and 2020, there is a time for the country to revise their NDC if their NDC is not according to the Paris Agreement work program. It's not in line with Paris Agreement work program. That's the first one. And the second one is also give a chance for other countries to improve or raising their ambitions to reduce the emission. During 2020 until 2030, that's the Paris Agreement implementation program. 10 years. The 2020 until 2030, hopefully below 2 degrees are achieved. And between 2000 to 2023, there will be a global stock take where there's a global accounting. There, all states in the earth are on the track below the 2 degrees. This is so. What is the agenda of the COP24? Because this is very, very important COP. Everybody waiting for the work program of the Paris. Everybody hoping much on this successful implementation of Paris agreements based on this work program. So basically, there are a lot of in my perception, the negotiators works very hard. Even they work until very, very late in the evening, in the morning, but still, the political power, that's really very important on the successful of the Paris Agreement work program. Even though they're talking about the climate change, again, the issue of politics, the issue of economic are still on the front of the table of politics and economic. For example, like the country, they want to do like this. They want the more on technical things, yeah, and they propose they pledging some money to help the developing country. But the developing country asks, you should bring the money on the table so we will know how much money will be available, so we can design the activities based on the money. But the developing country said, no, you have to perform first your happen during the COP. The very, very political power is there. And also a link to the issue of finance. The biggest roadblock on the successful outcome of Paris Agreement is the finance itself. There are political battles among the developing country and the developed country, because they want a developing country as the developed country to provide sufficient detail, quantitative information about the public, yeah. But the developed country said that the finance is not necessarily as a grant. It might be a loan, and the support is not necessarily as a finance. It could be technological transfer and also the capacity building. So it seems like it weakened the commitment of the developed country to support the developing country. And there's also absence the agreed definition between the climate finance among the countries. What does it really mean? So that's why this is the roadblock in the discussion under the finance. And then the human right in Paris rule books. As we know that the element of human rights is on the preamble of the Paris Agreement. So all the CSO society who joined the UNFCCC negotiation try to bring the issue of human rights also on the implementation of Paris Agreement, which is written on the Paris book guidelines. Yeah, because we just put in the preamble, do not put it in the implementation, so it will be harming the issue of the indigenous people, the issues, but other issue also discussed in the COP24. For example, about loss and damage. Loss and damage is under adaptation from other resources, from the adaptation, for example. But this is not part of the Paris Agreement. Bring it the issue into the Paris Agreement work program, but I think it doesn't quite succeed, so it's still outside the loss. It's still outside on the Paris Agreement work program. Other thing is gender and climate change. Gender climate change. In Fiji, gender UNFCCC Gender Action Plan. So parties mandated to use this action plan, focus on the data on gender analysis, on differentiated impact of the climate change on the woman and men. So this is out of the Paris Agreement work program. And the other thing is Talanoa Dialogue. Talanoa Dialogue started the Fiji COP. Tala means talking or telling a story, and Noa meaning zero or without concealment. This is jointly prepared by Fiji, Morocco in COP22 presidency. It was launched in January 2018. So basically, the Talanoa Dialogue, it is out of the negotiation. So all the negotiators, the reviewer can sit together and presenting where we are now, where we do want to go, and how do we get there. So basically, this is like a story how we achieve the Paris agreements without concealment, with the call, with the fresh air, saying that this is really, really important. The world can't wait anymore. We should do something. So this is a spirit of civil society to give awareness for the negotiator, stop talking, start negotiating, and do implementing. On the COP24, there is also the special report, Global Warming 1.5 degrees by the IPCC. So the IPCC highlighted that if the NDC itself is still insufficient, all the NDC has been submitted on the country are still insufficient. Even when we collected all the NDC, we are on the track until 3.4 increasing temperature of the rise of the climate. So we cannot meet the target of 1.5 degrees, yeah, with our own existing NDC now. So we still need 45% cut of the reduction of emission. And to achieve the zero emission 2050, we should do very, very ambitious measures. And then the other report from the other reference saying that emission gaps in 2030, if we counting in the names, it's between 11 until 13.5 gigs if we want to achieve 2 degrees. And we have to cut emissions 16 until 19 gigatons if we want to achieve 1.5 degrees. So basically, the country is still far away to achieve NDC under the Paris Agreement. There's another report from the Clara. Clara is a climate, land, ambitions, and right alliance. Consists of the national and international NGO all over the world who are bringing the issue of chain right, land right, and also the ecosystem integrity. So Clara Report convincing the negotiators of the state. Actually, 1.5 is still reasonable to be achieved. Still reasonable to achieve, as long as we can do 5 steps, 5 very important steps. The first one, agriculture emission. We have to cut the agriculture emission, especially from the expansion, from the what is it? The fertilizer, chemical fertilizers, and so on. And then the second one, we have to secure right over the indigenous customary lands all over the world, because the studies show that the carbon stocks are stored very, very good in the area of indigenous and customary law, at least 1,000 gigatons. And number three, we should do rehabilitation and expand forest cover. And number four, halting deforestation and forest degradation. And number five, combine with rapid mitigation in fossil fuel emission. So the study is saying that 5 very important steps on this report are very, very important if we really want to achieve 1.5 degrees. Instead of doing like geoengineering, instead of doing like carbon capture storage. Carbon capture storage, it means that you catch the carbon, you store into the deep into the soil, and then after that you reduce again emission, again you produce the emission and capture again. So there's another issue out of the negotiation saying that carbon capture storage, geoengineering is very, very important to achieve the significant emissions reduction. But basically, we don't know what is the impact later on for the human being. So this is the maps that has been made by the Clara Report, saying that all of the carbon stock among the 64 countries, 293 gigatons of carbon are in the community land right. So that's why it needs to be strengthened and recognized by the state or by the government. Unfortunately, less than 10% of the indigenous land has been recognized by the states. So this is basically our issue, how to promote to the governments to protect and to recognize the right of indigenous people who live in their ancestral land. This is the design. The picture is giving the designs, how to reduce the emission based on the land management approach. For example, there are 3 big bubbles here. The first one is restoring forests and other ecosystem by doing restoration, natural generation, avoiding conversion of the forest, and responsibility use of the forest. And the other is about the indigenous and community land right. Very, very important to make sure the tenure security, collective land management, and protections of lands and forests. And the last one about the transforming agriculture. The transforming agriculture is not only about the demand, but also the supply itself. Yeah. So healthy diet is very important. Reducing food miles is also important, and reducing the waste from food is also important. More improving the waste, more productive. So more productive, more transfer, more what is it? More intensifying of agriculture. So these are the idea how to reduce emission based on the land management. The other issue, Rainforest Foundation Norway also doing kind of research in 6 countries who has top 5 rainforest number all over the world. The first one is Brazil, the Indonesia, Peru, Myanmar, and Colombia. The Rainforest Foundation Norway doing analysis about the NDC. So based on the analysis, it says that even though the 6 countries successfully achieve their end all over the world. For example, in Indonesia, every year our baseline forest into other function. Through the NDCs, the NDCs document, Indonesia will deforestation 325,000 hectares per year. 25 million hectares of forest in Indonesia still continue deforested, which is a size of Belgium's country. This is one of the example that they are not sufficient. So this is only the highlight. I just keep it. So basically, to complete the Paris rules, yeah, it called Katowice COP24 is Katowice climate package. However, as a society, we believe that the outcome of COP24 are weak and still there's imbalanced power related to agenda negotiation and the finance. And the most important things, all the reference of human rights are missing from all text of negotiation agreement rulebooks. That's really, really sad. And the other very, very important issue, a lot of things to do, they just make it like a POP for the Article 6 about market and non-market approach are pending for the next COP. Why? Because all the countries are still not agree how to utilize the Article 6. Because some of the country thinking this is under the red scheme and it should be a different or different privilege for the country who has the forest. But other countries thinking, no, it should be part of this. Yeah, because they want to do the market. And the second thing, finish the NDC or it can be parallel. Parallel, it means you finish the NDC, that if you do parallel, it will weaken the ambitious responsibility to finish the NDC. So that's why very, very debatable issue on Article 6 about the market and non-market approach. And we don't know also what will be red scheme will be later on, because that will be very important when this Article 6 has been established. Basically, CSO calls are stringent, the accounting rules, and should be out of the NDC. This is the NGO position. I think that's all my presentation. Thank you very much, Edna.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Emmy. Thank you very much, Emmy. So, sorry. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much, Emmy. There was some break in the presentation, I think because of technical difficulties, but we got your message that there was already an agreement as to the rules or the rule book in operationalizing the Paris Agreement that should be effective by 2020. And the study on that the community managed areas are actually not just potential, but it's actually storing a lot of carbon and are not only in terms of reducing emission, but actually carbon storage is, I think, welcome by a lot of CSO, because that has been our call to actually support community managed areas in terms of their potential for adaptation, as well as, of course, in mitigation. I see some questions. Yes, the question the question is actually on whether we will be sharing the presentation. Yes, we will be sharing the presentation and some other information and materials, and Dazzle will send it via email. Now we go to, if some of the CSOs are actually not happy with the outcome of COP24, there is actually a silver lining around it. The Local Communities Indigenous Peoples Platform, which has somehow been operationalized, and we will hear more about this from our next two speakers. So we have Lakpa Nuri Sherpa. Lakpa is the AIPP, or the Asian Indigenous Peoples Pac Environment Program Coordinator and the focal point of the International Indigenous People Forum on Climate Change, IIPFCC, to the UNFCCC. So Lakpa has been attending and very active in the COP scene in the past decade, probably. And then joining him is Mr. Kitisak Ratanasiri. Sorry. Kitisak about that. I always miss that one. So Kitisak is the chairperson of AIPP and the acting president of the Network of Indigenous Peoples in Thailand. We're so excited to hear more about the Local Communities Indigenous Peoples Platform and how is this to be operationalized, as well as some key themes that very particularly important to us in the CSO working on social forestry, particularly on livelihoods, safeguards, FPIC, and the rest. Welcome, Lakpa and Kitisak.
Okay, thanks, Edna. I mean, I share the voice of Amy that we were very disappointed when all the reference to the human rights text were deleted. No, even in the draft there were some references, but then in the end, eventually they were deleted. We share similar concerns on how and it's exactly, if you remember, in 2015 when the Paris Agreement actually was adopted, it's on the Human Rights Day, the very text on human rights was actually deleted from this Article 2, which is the objective of the whole article. No? So we can see there is a how do you call that? Lack of political will to actually accept the human rights language. Now that clearly shows that. So before I go into my sharing, I would like to briefly share about how indigenous peoples are engaging in the climate change convention. So let's just to give context for our audience as well. The climate change, the issue of climate change, it's not only the impacts that indigenous peoples are facing, but also indigenous peoples are facing impact from the climate change policy and measures that actually are being drafted, that are being implemented. Now, so it's like there is a two-way of looking into the climate change. And that's also the reason why indigenous peoples around the world actually started engaging in this process. And during this process of engagement, indigenous peoples has a status as an observer, not like farmer, like youth, like women group. All the observer organizations have the status of observer and not as a partner. And that limits the whole issue of the full and effective participation of indigenous peoples. No? When you are an observer, you are not there to sit on the decision-making table and have a say of what you really want, because indigenous peoples represents the people in the ground, for example. So, but then things are changing. Things started changing since 2015, like Amy was saying. In 2015, the Paris Agreement and the whole reference to the human rights and indigenous people's rights. But then another thing that came out with the 2015 COP21 is the establishment of the Local Communities and Indigenous Peoples Platform. No? And that's how the engagement of indigenous peoples in the climate change convention process really started opening up in terms of having dialogue and interaction with the parties of the UNFCCC in terms of saying what indigenous peoples think about the different issues being discussed, particularly on local communities and indigenous peoples platform. So yeah, after 2015, it started opening up, and in particularly in last year in COP24, there was a decision that actually decision to establish the facilitative working group on local communities and indigenous peoples platform. And this facilitative working group is comprised of 7 indigenous people's representatives, and 7 government representatives. So there is a equal in terms of the number of participation. But then, above all, the most important thing is they will have an equal status. So it's not like government will have more say in the issue that will be discussed at the platform. So they will have an equal say and status. So which is very unprecedented in terms of our engagement with the UNFCCC. And one of the unique things that came out from the COP24 is also on the process, the way this facilitative working group will be nominated, for example. In other UN processes, what happens is usually UN indigenous peoples do the self-selection process and nominate their representative, right, regional representative. But in the end, it will be the president or the committee that is formed at the convention level will decide. But in the UNFCCC facilitative working group, the SOFSTA co-chair will accept or respect the self-selection process of indigenous peoples. And just to inform everybody that all the indigenous peoples from all over the world, the 7 regions have already did the self-selection process and submitted their regional representatives. So it's unique in that sense that they are respecting the self-selection process of indigenous peoples. And that's unique thing that came out from the COP24 decisions. If you see the decision that came out from the COP24, it also refers to that facilitative working group should be talking to the bodies within and outside the convention. And as a focal point of International Indigenous Peoples Forum on Climate Change, I had an opportunity to attend a meeting with the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It's the scientific community that prepares report that Amy was referring to, 1.5 degree. Actually, this community, scientific community has, how to call that? Play an influential role in terms of engagement with the government. So that was the first meeting that we had, and the facilitative working group will continue to engage with the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And if you see, actually AIPP as a regional organization also submitted its views on the work plan, and actually have suggested IPCC to come out with a special report on traditional knowledge and land rights, because you cannot really separate knowledge and land rights unless we really want to protect, strengthen our traditional knowledge. Land rights has to also be protected and strengthened. So yeah, so those were very key decisions that came out from COP24 and are very relevant for indigenous peoples. So I'll just stop there, and I would invite Kitisak to further contribute to the sharing.
Okay, thank you very much, Lakpa, for the overview of the LCIP. Yeah, I just call LCIP platform. Yeah, and the some of the key issues from the COP24. Yeah, I just add on a few points that Lakpa has not yet covered. The first thing, like Lakpa already mentioned, that the COP24, they decided to establish the facility working group, and then they already gone through the selection process. And for Asia, we already have Pasang Sherpa as the main representative from Asia, and we have Mina Setra as an alternate representative to be in the facility working group. So so 2 of them will be our main person to participate in the facility working group. The term of office is 3 years. And of course, according to the COP24 decisions, the term can be extended up to 2 consecutive terms, not more than that. And in addition to this, in June, there will be in-session workshop. They actually will dedicate that session to the enhancement of the participation of local communities. I think this issue is also becoming another key issues that discussed when we start debating on the platform, because some areas, some regions, IP and local communities can be like the same. And in some regions, there's a clear distinction between local communities and indigenous people. Now that's why these issues sometimes remains some problems in some regions. That's why, and the representation of local communities in this platform is not yet clear, yeah? Because they said that after the review of the implementation of the platform, yeah, they will, yeah, of course, they will invite local communities to send their representative, yeah, at least 3 people, yeah, into the platform. So the upcoming sessions, yeah, they will, yeah, discuss on this issue. I think, yeah, we need. I don't know, yeah, in Asia, because we also need to, yeah, discuss about this issue as well, because of course in many countries we also have a lot of local communities. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's one of the issue I like to add on, and of course I think I don't know, yeah, who are in the webinar today. I hope they already have some of the background of the LCIP platform. If not, yeah, we can give a little bit more information about the platform. I just add on a little bit on this. Maybe Lakpa can also add on some of the initiatives that the IPP already started, like the TK network and also other issues. Probably, yeah, maybe I don't, yeah, take much time, so maybe Lakpa can add on some of the IPP initiatives.
Yeah. Sure. Thanks, Kitisak. Thanks for that addition. That's really helpful. So just to continue our sharing, like Kitisak said, there is also an effort from our end, because the most of the discussions on platform is happening mostly at the international level. And thanks to NTFP-EP, I mean, you have been pioneering the webinar to actually outreach the people who have not been able to attend the climate change meetings. This is a very good practice that we should continue. But so we have actually reflected our engagement, and always AIPP has been prioritizing to facilitate the ground voices in the international meetings on climate change, so that we can really, bring the experiences and concrete recommendations, and that we have been doing, and then we'll continue to do that. But then we also realized that when we're engaging in this platform, that there has to be some initiatives that has to be done at the national and regional level. Even though if you see the decision of the platform that came out from COP24, it specifically refers that the stakeholders and parties to actually take initiative to actually include this platform discussions in the national and regional level. So even before that decision came in AIPP, we discussed actually and thought that it would be very important to establish a network of knowledge holders and practitioners at the regional level and also at the national level, because there are very good examples, the best practices that the communities are actually implementing despite the challenges that they are facing. I mean, and the different challenges that they're facing, whether it's from policy or from the different the developments that are coming in the communities. So we decided that we will establish a network of the community champions who are actually showing how better the natural resources can be protected. At the same time, continuing the knowledge that they have cultivated and transferred from generation to generation. So we will be launching this year a network on traditional knowledge, and this is also to bring the ground voices from our region to this the platform. As Kitisak said, the work plan is yet to be finalized. No? There was a call. I think. The deadline was February 28, where many CSOs, parties, and also AIPP submitted the work plan. So we're really trying to see how best AIPP, and of course together with other indigenous peoples organizations, which comes under the International Indigenous Peoples Forum on Climate Change, actually really design this work plan in such a way that it actually also addresses some of the issues that indigenous peoples are facing and also local communities are facing in the and different reasons. So that would be really a focus, and yeah, we'll try to always see how we can promote and protect those the issues of knowledge holders and practitioners. Yeah, so I will just stop there before we start continuing the discussion.
Yeah, can I add on just a little bit? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. In answer to the questions raised by Edna at the beginning about livelihood issue and safeguards, I think that under the development of a work program, yeah, of the platform, this issue can be very much well fit into that work plan. So I think, but because right now they're still in the process of designing and calling for more inputs. Yeah. I think that that's actually our role. Yeah, if you want to see that the safeguard, the livelihood issues that are related to the forest, yeah, could be included in the work plan, so we can also take initiative and propose. I think that I don't know, yeah, the upcoming in session, even though they said that they will focus on the enhancement of the participation of local communities, but and of course, because if you look at the COP decision from COP24, they also encourage or invite the secretariat to develop a work program, at the next intersessional meeting, and then at the COP. I think that is an opportunity. I think we need to discuss and prepare right now.
Yeah.
Submission of our inputs.
Yeah. Yeah. Some of the, because the challenge, some of the despite the good things and that has come out, the doors opening up for more effective engagement. There is a space to have a face-to-face meeting with the government during also informal negotiation. These are the, like I said, unprecedented positive changes that's happening around. But there are also, how to call that, the challenges, especially in terms of the participation of indigenous peoples. I mean, not everybody will have that ability to raise funds and then go and participate in that kind of meeting. So one of the ongoing, actually, this has been our, how to call that, demands that indigenous peoples have been raising since they started engaging with the Climate Change Convention, is like, unlike other UN processes, this Climate Change Convention doesn't have any, how to call that, a dedicated support, dedicated funding established to support facilitating the participation of indigenous people. So we've been really pushing that. Now with the facilitative working group has been established, and of course, if you see the decision text, there is not yet a very strong text on funding. It says subject to the availability of funds. So our demand is that it's not just the facilitative working groups, but then also the others that has to be participating in those very important meetings. So funding issue is very important, and also a challenge for indigenous people's full effective participation. And we have been raising this now continuously in our meetings. And just to also update, like actually when this like a very positive decision on platform, the facilitative working group took place, Canada, I mean, of course, I mean, the role of Canada has significantly changed since the change in the leadership of the country. They also announced that they will support the position, indigenous people's, senior indigenous people's positions, to actually facilitate the implementation of the platform functions, and also looking into indigenous people's issues now, which is really a positive thing. And we have been actually repeatedly demanding with the United People's Parties that there has to be a focal point of indigenous peoples within the Secretariat to look into our matters, to look into our issues, to look into the platform discussion. And actually, that's another important good news that actually came out from COP24. So that will really facilitate. But our, how to call that, a message to the United Peoples is also that the platform doesn't become a space to discuss everything of indigenous peoples. Like Amy was saying, there are a number of other areas where we need to participate and make sure that human rights are respected. So we also don't want to make this platform to discuss everything about indigenous peoples, but also we should get similar kind of space and opportunity in other areas where we can contribute together with other actors joining the climate convention. Yeah. So yeah, I will just stop there. Hello. Kidisa, can you hear me? Hey.
Thank you very much, Lakpa and Kitisa.
Thanks.
So, so there is a question. I will read it. Wait. Okay. So there's a question. From Roger. Is there an online platform that digests these progresses and challenges for CSOs and indigenous people and local communities to enable free flow of information to and from the ground all the way to the COP negotiations? I think a quick highlights and maybe link to more information resources for further information of interested parties.
Okay, Kitisak, you want to go or?
Yeah, you can go ahead because
Okay.
as you know, yeah, I think one of the activities under the platform is to establish a web portal, yeah, to disseminate the information of the, like we can say that the experiences and best practices of indigenous people, yeah, addressing the impact of climate change. So that means, yeah, it depends on us, yeah, how we are going to use that kind of a web portal, yeah, our knowledge and experiences. And of course, tomorrow is another webinar to start talking about these issues. So it's not yet finalized, but the idea is there. Yeah, it depends on us how we're going to decide on this. So yeah, please join the webinar tomorrow to share your ideas and how you want to see the web portal of these issues be function.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just to add, I think the sharing of information is very important. I mean, we have always been raising this issue to the government that the information is not there to the ground. No? That's a huge gap. And also, of course, that responsibility also lies with people like us who are joining the meetings in the international level, and we make sure that those things are actually being shared. No? So at least for indigenous peoples who are actually engaging in the climate change, we have a listserv. That's specific to indigenous peoples, no, from 7 regions of the world. So we regularly update. But then for our reason, we actually, AIPP has a dedicated website on environment issues, not just on climate, on biodiversities and other areas. It's called Climate Change Monitoring and Information Network. I can share the link that to you. And of course, like Kitisak said, there is an effort also to really make the work of this platform accessible, no, to everybody, so that there is also interactions. Well, I mean, it's we don't have, because the one that Kitisak is referring is more specifically on platform, no, but we don't really have an online platform that captures everything like Emmy was sharing, no, captures everything that Kitisak and I was sharing. So this may be a need that we need to think of, like how do we make sure this sharing of information. But at least from our end as a regional organization, AIPP, what we do is we do a prep meeting before we go to this kind of international meetings. No? So at least we consolidate the messages that indigenous peoples want to put forward. And we also prepare some kind of advocacy papers, you know, like the messages based on those consultations. Even after coming from the meeting, we do the debriefing. And of course, I also know that NTFP has also been doing that kind of preparatory meeting and debriefing, which is very important and good practice that we should continue. But just to also inform everybody, like from this time, as AIPP has assessed our engagement, and we thought that we need to do a prep meeting that includes CBD, that includes climate, that includes other processes. So it's not like we prepare separately for climate and we prepare separately for biodiversity convention. So this year in actually, when is May, we will be doing a AIPP regional preparatory meeting on environmental processes. So this will really give a very good opportunity for the indigenous peoples from different countries to come together, because we cannot bring everybody to the climate meetings, no? To say like what specific messages that you have from your community, from your particular country, and AIPP will consolidate and put it in the form of, like I said, advocacy paper, and we'll bring that. So, and we will, this is the first year that we are trying to do this, and we will try to do this in the future, because I think this is really, really important way of bottom-up approach, and also at the same time we feed what's coming from top to the ground.
Okay, so there's actually a follow-up question to that. So it's you have answered it partly, Lakpa, but it's more like, how can the CSO and the IPs on the ground support negotiators representing their sector? And related to that is, how do you, like, the platform is, I know it's just a platform, it's still being developed now, but good, it has equal status to a party. Related to that is that, what is exactly the relationship of the LC platform to the COP? So in a way, is it advisory, recommendatory, or just one of the many voices? And related to that, is there a system, or what is the state of discussion of how the LC can also encourage state parties to comply with indigenous people's rights within the context of climate change?
Right, right. Okay, I'll take the first question about how can we support the negotiators. I think there are different ways of doing that. One is we should really engage at the national level, no? Because like the nationally determined contribution, I mean, that's the action plan of the government, right, to address climate change. We really need to strengthen our engagement in the national level, because that's where the planning, no, will take place. And that's also refers to what Amy was saying. We are still going towards the direction of 3 point some degrees. So it's not even like the one that's in the Paris Agreement. So we really need to engage and contribute to the process that government is taking at the national level. And another way is like, because when we engage in the international meetings, the good practices that we have is we always do a dialogue with the government before the actual negotiation starts, no? A prep meeting, or not prep meeting, a preparatory dialogue with the government. And actually we have been consistently doing this. Even we did this during the COP24. And this is done because the indigenous peoples, of course, the focal point communicates with the climate change secretariat, and with consultation with them, we talk to the COP president. So, and because when COP president invites, it's easy, no, the parties to come in, because if indigenous peoples invite, they may not, all the parties may not come in, right? So that's the way we've been engaging at the international level, and we put forward recommendations, what we really want and what kind of support we need from the government. So yeah, there are different ways of doing this, but then of course, informal meeting is sometimes a very good approach also, like we invite them for lunch, coffee, and we also try to discuss with them. So yeah, those are different ways that that actually we can, and actually just to tell that Philippines, I mean, in the past has been really instrumental in terms of like the engagement with the indigenous peoples. So they were like very open to listen to us and even put forward our recommendations in their statement. So yeah, there are some champions within the UNFCCC parties who really support indigenous people's issues in their agenda as well. Yeah.
Okay. So.
And what was the another question? Sorry.
The other question is about encouraging state parties. And then that, or the relationship, after the relationship of the LCIP to the COP. How do you? What is?
Kitisan, you want to?
Okay, I will try, because I'm also not a lawyer, a legal. I think we used to discuss this at the beginning about the placement of the platform, because there's a number of proposals whether this platform be newly set up as an independent body, and then the roles is to make a recommendation to the COP. But at the end, I think that after a while, I think that this kind of issue is not yet mentioned anymore. But that's why, from my understanding, the platform is now placed under the Substar. So yeah, so I think more or less it's like one of the body that assists SAFSA in the to implement the issue on the TK related to the climate change mitigation and adaptation. So yeah, that's my understanding because they don't discuss anymore about the placement or any body that relationship. I think that's still under SAFSA. So yeah, as you know, the SAFTA just preparing the draft decisions for the COP.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, I think it's more because I also remember what it is like saying because indigenous peoples really wanted whatever is discussed here be
yes.
how do you call that?
That was the plan before.
Accepted by the COP, no? Because that's where the decision takes place, right? But then now and again, like the first point I said about the issue of participation with the status of observer, no? Parties always wanted to remind this is a party-driven process, no?
Mm-hmm.
Observer cannot decide on behalf of the convention. So yeah, in a way, it's more not decision-making body, but then more in terms of providing recommendations. That's what Kitisak is referring to. Yeah.
Yes, the LCIP is highlighting its role as a information exchange platform. As of now, that's the way we see it, and I'm not sure if how would this be looked at in the by 2020. But may I tempt you to answer this question? So for indigenous people, as it's consistent also to the question from Roger, all these international and regional platform, at the end of the day, so indigenous people who we know are very vulnerable also to climate change, but are stewards. In the preparation, cases in the preparation of the NDC, and some country parties are actually reformulating their slash and burn policies, and a lot of them are actually impacted by these new policies. So do we expect the LC platform to have some role in terms of making sure governments understand the difference between slash and burn by ordinary farmer or private person, or by the Sweden farming as practiced by indigenous people? Because these are the questions that really matters to communities. How can that platform be actually useful for us so that we will support them? Lakpa or Kitisak?
Kitisak.
Well, I think that if you look at the COP decisions on the platform, they also invite party to consider the function of platform be implemented at the local, national, and regional levels. So that means they already encourage the parties to look at this issue, and also asking IP and local communities to look at this issue as well. I think it depends on country to country how we're going to make use of this body for advocating the issue, like you mentioned, slash and burn issues. That is a matter of many communities. So as long as we are clear that that the platforms already open the channel for us to use it, why not? If we have some of the information, the issue that we want to advocate, why not we just make use of it? So it depends really much on us and how we're going to use it. That's my point. Still, in the work plan, if we think that this issue is really matter, why not we just highlight on the issue of the TK on the shifting cultivations, and then we also try to promote parties to recognize this as one of the sustainable mode of cultivation. This kind of thing, I think that can also be possible.
Yeah. I think that's because the gap about the policymakers and what community practice is, because most of the policies, I mean, in general, no, it's just like done by the policymakers who doesn't really understand the ground situation. So if you see, one of the functions of this platform is to have an exchange, no, exchange of the good practices. And of course the documentation as well. So I mean, just to tell you, we did an exchange visit. It's called a learning route. AIPP did in partnership with Procursor, which is an organization. So what we did in that learning route is we invited communities and we invited government together, no? And we took them to the Hinladnai, of course, in Chiang Mai, no, Thailand. So the perspective of the government people, especially the one who really don't understand the ground realities, it's very different. Like you said, Edna, it's like shifting cultivation actually is not a good, how to call that, farming system, for example. It contributes to climate change, for example. The whole perspective and mindset changed when they went to the ground. So there is a potential, no? It's not like that will happen, but then because of this exchange, and that might happen. But then, like Itisak said, it really depends on how well we can actually design this work plan to actually implement the concept. If we really do a very good homework, if everybody, all the actors participate and actively engage to really make it to hit all the functions that we have really think of when we operationalize this platform, no? Because if you see, the objective of the platform is to really strengthen the knowledge of indigenous peoples, and actually in the sitting cultivation, because of the diversity of the crop and species, actually it helps them to adapt to the impacts of climate change. So I see the value, the potential that it might, if the work plan and our engagement is strengthened, that might happen. Yeah.
Okay, so I see one more question, and okay, it's cute question. Okay, so it's actually from Femi. This is an excellent idea to have a prep meeting on environmental processes. What's the priority agenda that you think the CSOs IPs need to work on or take to these environmental processes? Can you give us a heads up on what we need to mobilize from the ground up? Maybe something concrete along the lines of advocating stronger affirmative action on shifting cultivation, priority agenda for advocacy in the short term and medium term.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Femi, for that questions. As I said, this is the first time, no, that we are doing like a very comprehensive regional prep meeting, and we are yet to actually discuss into the agenda and the focus, but I can give based on our engagement in the different processes. No? And of course, for climate, it will be the LCIP, of course, there will be one of the agenda. But we are also strengthening our engagement in the CBD. And there is this very important process ongoing in the CBD, which is post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, because the CBD strategy from 2011 to 2020 is ending very soon. And now the governments are already starting to think of what beyond 2020, you know, because the vision they think is living in harmony with nature. So how do we actually achieve this vision of living in harmony with nature? And the way that indigenous peoples are saying is that, and it became very clear in the last COP in Egypt that the parties still will not be able to achieve all the targets that they have set by 2020, no, whatever they have said. The biodiversity is still degrading. So one of the factors that they have realized is really not recognizing the collective actions that indigenous peoples are doing in the ground, no? And also not making sure that indigenous peoples are fully participating. So it's actually a very good assessment that came out. And if you see the decision that came from the Egypt meeting, it explicitly says that indigenous peoples, local communities, and other actors be accounted or be consulted when they are doing this preparatory meetings, national, regional, and international. So that's the one area where we will really focus during our prep meeting, because we will also have that kind of process at the national level, no? Because that's where the government engagement of the people from the ground and indigenous peoples and government will take place. So post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, one, and of course the platform, and now again, that one that Amy has said, the Paris rules book, in terms of how do we actually make sure, how do we sensitize community what's happening, what has come out from COP24, what has come out of the platform. So it's also another agenda. But then I said the initiative of the AIPP thinking of launching the platform would also be another highlight. So that the one point that Femi is mentioning, how do we facilitate the ground, ground voices is not actually missed in that kind of meeting. So I mean, we don't have that very concrete, but then that's the way we are thinking to frame our prep meeting.
Okay. Okay. So can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much, Lakpa. And we are really happy that it's now a lot of linking with CBD and UNFCCC. And I think CBD has long experience, a history with engaging, institutional actually experience in engaging with IPs, with HA, as well as it's very important. I think because the HA target, the 2020 will end, and a lot of things have been done on that. So I think the LCIP can build on that, even with the information exchange. It can build on a lot of this traditional knowledge, system and practices that have been collated by the CBD. And also, I think with the linking with the Nagoya Protocol, the issue of intellectual property rights, particularly of new technologies related to climate change, will also be protected. Okay. Emmy, do you have anything to say or on the LCIP, as you were also very much active in the monitoring the platform since 2015?
I think about the LCIP is already very clear, mentioned by Kritisak and Lakpa. But basically, this is very quite active as issue within the international level. But unfortunately, like in Indonesian's level, we don't really recognize the indigenous people. We are only saying that we have a local communities. That's the problem. But until the COP24, there's no clear designs within the Indonesia what will be the platform operationalized in Indonesia. And I believe this is not only in Indonesia itself, could be in many countries. That's good that LAPA already have a strategy to inform the platform at the national level. But for us, it's a little bit confused because we, as the country, the government say that we are having a local community, but within the country itself, we are still not clearly defined whether we belongs to LC or belongs to the IO.
Okay. Thank you. So I think we have a few minutes to go, but I would like to ask our esteemed panelists, thank you very much for taking time from your really busy schedule to join us in this platform. So my question is related to, of course, social forestry, because that is actually a tie that binds us all. So how can social forestry advance the Paris Agreement targets effectively and equitably? And how or what is the needed support from what is the needed support for NGOs and IPs to actually make this reality? Maybe I can start. From the very first time that we have been engaging in COP, that was in Peru, we have been always saying that the forest, as well as other landscape that are managed by indigenous people, are actually managed by them better. Without government support, sometimes it's okay. With government support, it's a little tricky. But of course, with government, institution, and collaboration, it's the ideal one. So for us, that we are actually on building NTFP-based enterprises. Our messages was always that NTFP-based enterprises are low emissions livelihood. Livelihood that builds on the traditional occupation of indigenous people, actually on indigenous knowledge systems, are more sustainable as they really provide stronger incentive for forest conservation and really bring concrete benefits to indigenous people. And that's our view of how we, as part of the social forestry practitioner, will be working towards operationalizing the Paris Agreement. Maybe Emmy, who has just sold community carbon credits.
Yeah. So on my previous presentation, it is really clear that most of the land all over the world are possessed and managed by the local community and even indigenous people. And when they manage by the local community and indigenous people, the condition is relatively very, very good, because they are really aware that by protections the forest, protection the ecosystem, it also correlated to protection of their life, their future, their livelihood. So the social forestry is very, very important, where the state recognize the local community and indigenous people right over the resources. If not, the land will be possessed by the private sector. Private sector also always greedy to expand more their business, extractively manage the natural resources. So WARSI also have done some kind of study on the social forestry. So Indonesia, if you got the social forestry license, you get the right, management right for 35 years. So we make like a history baseline. Before it managed by the local community, the deforestation is happening. Not because of the local community did by themselves, but people outside did by themselves. And the local community doesn't have any power to chase them out, to let them go. But once they already got recognition from the government, they have the power. This is our right, this is our land, everybody cannot come and destroy our resources. And we also doing like Edna before, recognition is not enough. It should be supported by economic incentive, livelihood program, because local community cannot do by their own. They are not private. They don't have any resources, capital to build their own business. So that's very important. WARSI doing intervention on community economy and livelihood, like a multi-tier commodity, not only rubber, but also cacao, other products. We have seen that the deforestation can stop completely, even it's become a zero deforestation. So as Alakpa said, it's very, very good if we deliver the good message, the good positive story from the community to the governments. So the governments will take affirmative decisions to protect the forest instead of giving to the private sector. And that it's quite success. We need a methodology to do that. If we are doing our own methodology without any verificator, so maybe they will not believe. So that's why we are doing the certifications for the carbon on the plant people certification. And it's really proof that a zero deforestation is happening. The second thing is that how the people can intensify the initiatives of the forest protection. And the government still not exist on that. So we are promoting the carbon sales into the international market, and finally we got the buyer from the Sweden's company. This is travel company. So they buy the credit from the community's carbon market, and the money goes directly to the local community without any intervention of the government. So from the money, we also discuss participatively with the local community whether you want to cash or you want to program. If they count it into the cash, they will get a very, very small amount of the money, each of the household. So they make a 5 priority agenda with that money. We are doing with the FD. The first one is the scholarship. The second one is healthy program. The third one is for economic and livelihood. And the fourth one for institutional capacity of the social forestry itself. And the last one is for forest monitoring. And for the implementation, we are really surprising because it's really got positive response from the local governments and even for the local community. Wow, our initiatives has been recognized internationally. However, at the national level, when we talk about this, they are not really happy because they said that you have to coordinate with us with the national level. You will harming our NDC. Can you imagine if all the social forestry will get the benefits from the carbon? how we can get the NDC target, something like that. So we have said to the government, actually, RED has been started. This is really happening. If the government's not state how the rules, how the implementations, it will still can continue happening. That's all, Edna.
Thank you very much, Emmy. We'll have a longer discussion on that one next time. So, Lakpa or Kitisak?
You want to go first?
Okay, I will be really brief. Yeah, I know there are only 4 minutes left.
4 minutes.
Okay, yeah, on the how we're going to advance the social forestry, for the implementation of Paris Agreement. For me, I think that as we already know and mentioned by many speakers already, that indigenous peoples, of course, we depend on forest for our living. Forest is our source of life and livelihood. So, of course, this kind of relationship we already documented and mentioned in many places already. I think this is also very important. I think, and of course, this also really much relevant to the forest. And and I think that for me, I think that one of the possible window we can advance the rights of indigenous people is through the NDC. Because right now, I think many countries, even though they haven't included the issue of traditional knowledge in the NDC yet. But I think that when they are going to review the NDC, I think that's the time. We can also propose that how to include the TK, particularly on the traditional forest-related knowledge, into the NDC, how to use this for adaptation and also mitigation. I think that's one of the channels we can also use it. And of course, in the meantime, I think that we also have to strengthen our network by awareness raising and also information sharing to ensure that they also get an up-to-date information from outside. And at the same time, inside they are also ready and strong enough so that they can also able to follow the issue effectively. I think that's the role I think we can do to support at the local level up to the international level.
Thank you. And for the last one, Lakpa?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I fully agree with all the suggestions. So just to briefly share, well, 80% of the planet's biodiversity, they're in the land territories of indigenous peoples. That also shows the very much how connected they are and taking a lead in terms of protecting the resources that they have in their territories. So first thing I think for me in the context of Asia, even though all the government has adopted UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, the implementation is really very, very, very weak. So the first thing that if we really want to strengthen the community's resource management, then they have to be legally recognized as indigenous peoples, which Emmy was mentioning the challenge in terms of the context of Indonesia. And the second thing, I just would like to connect to what Kitisak said. Community organizing and strengthening is very, very important, because no matter how good your policy is, if it is not implemented, it doesn't really make sense. And even if there is a very, law that actually is not favorable to communities, unless the community is strong, they cannot oppose, right? The implementation, the private sector, which the Emmy is saying, the destruction of the forest and the resources, the grabbing of land. So these are all actually really affects the social forestry, the way the indigenous peoples and local community manage. So yes, of course, the good policy is important, but then that has to be also supported by a very good initiative and support to really organize indigenous peoples, organizations, and communities to really be able to do a strong advocacy and campaign whenever needed. Now, because there are cases where indigenous peoples are being evicted in the name of conservation, in the name of national park, because those issues it's not like issue that used to be, but it's still happening, and there are policies and laws that are coming that are actually not facilitating indigenous people's rights, but then actually taking away their lands and resources. No? So I think really the community mobilization and making them strong to face that kind of challenge is I think from my perspective, is very important. If we really want to give community the capacity to actually face that kind of challenge, and, so, and of course contribute to the Paris Agreement. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Even though at the very start of this webinar, before that, when we have the pre-COP, where we actually introduce LCIP and what is at stake at COP24, we were actually discussing on a very high note, you know. And then earlier today, Emmy said that it's really disheartening, the outcomes of COP in terms of human rights, gender, as well, of course, that even the IPPC report they did not agree to welcome the report.
Yes.
However, there are positive progress in terms of human rights, particularly rights of indigenous people. So this is actually where we can actually focus in the next few years, as we also look forward into developing social forestry CSO forum version 2.0 in the next coming months. So thank you very much all for participating. And then I would like to thank the HIVE team of NTFP, Liana and Earl, who is, I think, is in the beach, no? And of course, Dassel, our very active CSO forum facilitator. Thank you very much and see you in the next webinar.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Chatting and everyone, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks to Emmy, Edna, Dajo. Bye-bye.